Mark Zweig, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
Hey, John, how's you doing?
I'm good. Tell me the origin story of Zweig Group. What was your original business model in the early days?
The original model was basically the model that's still followed today. Our genesis was as a consulting firm, and we had a pretty limited number of offerings, including business planning, executive search, retained HR-related stuff, and maybe some marketing-related consulting. And it was aimed at the architecture and engineering industry, which is a large, fragmented industry made up of, 100,000 plus companies, average one with 15 employees or so. Although our target client base was typically, firms with, let's say, between 100 and maybe 2,000 or 3,000 employees. That was sort of the sweet spot. The smaller ones thought they couldn't afford us, and the bigger ones thought they could do it all on their own. But that's how it really started. And it morphed from that into other services and certain products.
Tell me more about that. What products did you have?
Well, the first product that we offered, we had a free newsletter that went out to initially 250 people in my Rolodex. I had a non-compete for subscription-based newsletters, so I couldn't charge for it. That went out monthly, and over a period of 3 years, that grew to about 2,300 subscribers. And then we turned that into a paid vehicle. It immediately got 500 subscribers at a couple $100 a year. And eventually that became a 7-figure business in itself, the newsletter. But that was sort of the first product, although that was free. The first product we sold was a research report that we did on the principles of these companies, the owners. And we surveyed everything. There were a lot of financial surveys out in our industry, and there were salary surveys. We just aimed at the owners, and we found out everything about them, down to what their political orientation was, how many times they'd been married, what kind of vehicle they drove, what color it was, how big their office was. I mean, we got into lots of detail, and we sold that. We put that in a book, and we sold it. Today, the company has probably 20 or so of those. So the research is a big part of what they do. And they have other online research platforms, stuff. Then we started doing.
So you had this focused on architectural and engineering firms where you were helping them in the early days with consulting, business planning, executive search, and marketing. What prompted you to productize?
Well, everything. Who doesn't like getting MasterCard, Visa, and Amex deposits while you sleep? So, having some kind of revenue that wasn't tied directly to an immediate effort or time expenditure is always nice. But the other thing was that for us, it really gave us the perfect business model in that we spent all of our marketing dollars on the products. And again, that expanded to books, magazines, seminars, whatever. But so historically, after the company hit a certain level of maturity, it was, roughly 60%, 65% consulting and 35 to 40 products. And it's still true today, which is really amazing. After all the years the company's been in business. But so by promoting the products, and initially it was with direct mail, and we budgeted 40% of the product revenue on direct mail. And by spending that 40%, it drove the sales of the products, and then it made the phone ring with consulting opportunities.
So in that way, they kind of fed one another in a sort of symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely. I always felt we had better products than just people who made products and didn't do consulting. And at the same time, our consulting benefited from, the research and all the interaction that you had with clients to put a weekly newsletter together. And I mean, you can imagine, I mean, it was just a constant source of information flowing. It was unique information that other people didn't have.
I can also imagine there being conflicts, potential friction between the two businesses at times. I'm thinking, the temptation to preference consulting clients in the book, give the big booth space at the event to the highest paying consulting client. Like, how did you handle those inherent, conflicts of two very different business models that would arise, I would think, daily?
There really wasn't that much conflict. The biggest conflict was with executive search. The fact that you had a lot of information on your audience and then you could potentially be recruiting from them. That was probably the biggest source of conflict. The way we handled that is we really made a distinction between a client and a customer. We never recruited from a client, but I'm not going to say if you bought a $39 book from us that we might not, or your firm did, that we might not try to recruit somebody in your firm. That was one way we dealt with it. I think the other way was we really were very selective about the clients we worked for. We had really big relationships. Like our biggest relationship paid us about $1.4 million a year. And so, it sort of kept things manageable in a way because we weren't working for everybody. But that was the biggest conflict. I guess the other conflict, never really had issues about giving favoritism to clients or whatever, because if we wanted to do that, we could do that. I mean, there's nothing stopping us. But the other issue that later on led to some problems for the company after we sold it the first time to private equity, the consultants are the ones who do the seminars. They're the primary deliverers of speakers. And they put everybody on a separate incentive plan. So then the consultants didn't want to use their time to make money for the seminar people, or the seminar people didn't want to have their P&Ls impacted by use of the consultants. And that created some problems. I mean, that was just a small part of why they really plummeted after we sold them. When we owned the company, we had no special P&Ls for any unit. Everybody was treated the same, and we had one company bonus program, and that's what everybody participated in, period.
I'm glad you brought up the sale because I want to go there next. So how big did you get this company before you sold it to private equity? Like in terms of revenue, where were you guys at?
Well, at its peak, it got somewhere around 19 million in revenue, something like that, like 120, 130 employees. We had really good salaries. We had really good company vehicles. We had really great insurance. We paid 25% of our profits out to all employees through the payroll. And we had owner profit distribution. So realistically, after everything was loaded in, we generally made about a 10% profit, and we grew about 30% annually. And I was completely happy with that because, there was nothing funny going on. There were no personal stuff running through the company. We had audited financials probably for the last 5 years we were in business. And we paid decent salaries. So, there were others who would pay a lot less than we did and maybe show a higher EBITDA.
And thinking about that time, so you're 19 million in revenue, 130 employees. What was the triggering event that made you decide to sell?
We wanted to sell the company from the very beginning. It was built to sell, John. To use your terminology. I mean, because that's what we do as entrepreneurs. I mean, I don't know about you, but I get bored easily. I don't want to do the same thing my whole life. And although I have done a lot of the same stuff most of my life, but done a lot of different stuff too, as you know. So yeah, the goal was to build up and sell in 10 years, and it took 16 and a half years the first time. We had it sold prior to 9/11 to a nonprofit. It was very interesting. And it would have been a bigger number than we got in the end. At the time, they were buying 80% of the company for 12.5 million. So they valued it at like 15 million. And so that was as I said, that was a nonprofit. And we were down to the nitty gritty details. And then 9/11 hit and they just bailed completely. They said, we're not buying anybody. And it was all over. So then we had to slog out another 3 years. And that was very hard. It's a bad 3 years.
Because you were emotionally committed to selling, you sort of were excited about the prospects of. Yeah.
You got it. It's already shifting out. Everybody was, like, what are we going to do next? And, it was just a blow. At the time, I was going through a divorce from my first wife, which was very painful. She was, she had her own business. She completely let it go. She was a licensed psychologist. We had a reading clinic and, total meltdown, drug and alcohol addiction. And so I really had to step in, deal with my family more. And it was just really difficult. I traveled so much for that business, as you can imagine. And it was a really tough time. That 3 years of slogging it out was hard. But we did, and we sold it again, this time to private equity.
Yeah, I want to get to that, but you mentioned something that I'd be remiss not to drill into, and that is you mentioned that you started it with a view to selling it. You were building to sell. It took you 16 years.
Yeah.
What decisions did you make along the way to prioritize building a sellable company versus what many business owners do, which is prioritizing, cash flow so they can buy the boat and the goodies and all the extra things that usually come with owning a business? Like, just help for our listeners who may be going through the same decision. Do I want to build to sell, or do I want to have a cash cow here? Like, what decisions did you make personally to build to sell?
There were a lot of them. And I'll just say this, and I'm glad you asked that question. Whether you're going to sell it or not sell it, the same stuff helps. It's all I can say. I mean, having open book management. So there were people who really understood how the company made money and not just me. Big deal, really helped us. Strong management throughout, good second tier. And then the second tier had a second tier. I mean, everybody had to have their successor in place. So that was a big thing. Selling stock to key employees. We sold it as little as $15,000. We had an internal valuation formula that was based on revenue, and we would finance that to somebody for 5 years, and they could pay for it through payroll deduction. And then they got profit distributions monthly. So combined with the open book and then sharing profits with all employees, a separate profit pool for owners, having strong management. We had one database where everything went into. All client contact, all purchases, seminar registrations, anybody you talk to, it went into that one single database that was on a wide area network and was in all 7 locations. We were throughout the United States, primarily Boston, San Francisco, and DC, but then some other little offices. That database was essential to us, captured everything. And when we went to sell the company, we had about 200,000 names in there. And that was very valuable to the private equity firm because they combined 2 companies with us. That were essentially aimed at the same audience. So there was some real synergy there. I hate it when people make fun of that term synergy, but I make fun of tons of buzzwords, but synergy is real. If you're got a buyer that's in the same business you're in, you can have it. Not sure they ultimately achieved it, but that's another story. But so those are the kinds of things that I think were primary. Built a very good brand, spent a lot of money on marketing, So the name was very well known, and it was associated with anything business related to the architecture, audience, architecture and engineering audience.
How did you go about valuing the company? You mentioned it was a multiple of revenue. What multiple of revenue did you put on your employee ownership plan?
50% of revenue was our number.
So at 19 million, you're valuing it around 10.
Yeah, if you're doing 19 million, I mean, obviously it took a long time to get up to that, but 50% of revenue was really what we targeted.
And so you would say to a senior leader, look, I want you to buy into the business. You don't have any cash, so I'll finance it. I'll give you the money over 5 years, and you pay me back through payroll deductions.
That's correct.
And what was their reaction to that?
Everybody wanted the stock. We created a lot of demand for the stock. We had a strong internal stock market because there was a history of appreciation. There were profit distributions that were associated with that. And if you left, we paid you. So, it's a strong internal market. I mean, typical, like somebody buys 15,000 worth of stock in maybe 6 years or 7 years. If they left, they'd have like $120,000, $130,000 asset potentially. And that could be significant to them.
How did you pay them if they left?
We had buyback terms in there. If they competed with us or with their own firm or joined a competitive firm, they got paid at what they paid for it or current value, whichever's less. If they just go to work for a client or go do something else or whatever, they got paid full value, and it was paid out over, I don't remember, 5 years, something like that, with an interest-bearing note. We could either pay it in full immediately, or we could stretch it out and have a note to them for that. And that's the way we did it.
Did that create pressure for you to sell the business at any time?
No, it never did. We had no major shareholder leave that created a problem as it related to our capitalization. So, I mean, myself and my first real partner, I mean, even at the end when we sold it, I think the two of us combined had about 80% of the company. And so, the other shareholders we had, which were, we probably had 23, 24 owners. That was all spread out over that other 20, maybe 23%, somewhere in there, was held by all those other people.
You're building to sell. You have this, what looks like an exit with this not-for-profit that falls through.
Yep.
How did you fall into bed with a private equity company? Like, how did you shop the business? Did they come to you? Like, take me through that.
No, we hired somebody. It was a company that specialized in, I believe, at the time, it was like publishing and media companies. We were a difficult animal because we had these consulting and we had this other stuff. A lot of buyers, they're not interested in consulting. They think it's all tied to the individuals. They didn't realize we never made a call ever to anybody. The phone rang and we had a strong brand, and that's how we sold. It wasn't because of the people necessarily as much as it was because of the brand. But that was, so you had to kind of sell the potential buyers on that. But we hired a company to do it. It was a specialized company. I don't remember. Ultimately, I think we paid them about $400,000 to do what they did. It was worth it. We never would have found this PE firm otherwise.
So how many offers did you get on the business? Was it just the one offer from private equity? Did you have multiple offers?
When we actually sold it, we just had the one offer. That was it.
Okay. And what was their offer?
Well, the bottom line, we got about $10 million out of the company. We got, I think we got 80% in cash. 600,000, I believe, was in a note. Or no, let me think about this. Yeah, about 600,000 was a note that was paid off in about 18 months. And then the rest of it was turned into ownership interest in the new entity. So we had, I'd say, couple $1 million worth of ownership interest in the combined entity of us with these two other companies. Okay. So that was the deal. 80% cash, though, in the note. We felt like, hey, if we get that money, we were happy. We really wanted to get out. Okay. Today, if you sold that company, you'd get probably 2 times that, maybe 3, for what it was.
But you were motivated because you had this sort of false start, and
yep.
So this was what was on offer.
And I got divorced, and I got remarried, and I had a new wife, and I wanted to do something different. I did not want to travel like that. I just was tired of the whole thing.
So again, 10 million valuation, 80% in cash,
yep.
$600,000 note. The balance they rolled into a new entity. You rolled in as a shareholder. You rolled in into this new entity, and they kind of combined up 2 other companies, a money-losing magazine company, another one, all serving this architectural consulting space. That makes good sense to me. So did you stay on as an employee of the company when the private equity guys bought you?
No, I was able to leave immediately, which is what I wanted to do. They said I could stay and run it if I wanted to, but I didn't want to. Had a new wife, ready to go on to the next adventure. Didn't really want to be there. So yeah, we did not stay at all. Was immediately
and did you,
gone.
What about you? But you rolled a couple $1 million worth of value into this new entity. Did you have any sort of how are you thinking about protecting that asset? Were you on the board, or did you have any influence?
This will sound crazy to you, but we didn't. It was myself and my primary business partner, but we really didn't. We just wanted to get out of it. So basically, that all went away. We figured if it goes away, it was no problem for us. We got what we wanted out of the deal. We were gone. We were lucky we didn't have to work 3 years or something. He stayed. I was glad I didn't have to stick around, but we didn't get a dime out of that in the end.
Why? What happened?
They blew it. I mean, it's a classic case of they basically threw out every single thing that we did that made us great. They killed the company-wide bonus program. They stopped being open book. They pitted everybody against each other. They just, frankly, stopped doing what made us a successful company. And it just completely cratered. We had to put, I think Fred and I put like 400,000 of the money into retention bonuses. And that all, and that was for 18 months for some of the key people. And as soon as their 18 months was up, man, they were gone. Boom. They took their money, got their check, and then see you later. They all left. Most of those businesses, most of those people went into business, competing businesses with the firm. And most of them are still out there today, in fact. So it basically fragmented and sent the pieces everywhere. Eventually, the magazine group was carved off again and sold to somebody else. The SBA did not like this company. This private equity firm was an SBIC, Small Business Investment Corporation. And you know how those work. For like every $1 of private money they raised, they got $2 or $3 from the SBA. And so they were kind of keeping an eye on them. And these other 2 companies that they had acquired, they had too much debt on their balance sheet. They immediately put the debt from us and these other 2 acquisitions. I think they had like 15 or 16 million in debt right away on the balance sheet. And the SBA didn't like that. They thought it was too much in one entity. So they made them cut the magazine group out. They then borrowed some money from a mezzanine fund. And I was not really ever very familiar with how mezzanine funds worked. But basically, for our listeners who don't know, they lend money to established growing companies at higher interest rates with no strings attached. So these guys borrowed $6 million, and it too was an SBIC. It was a fund. And they borrowed $6 million from the mezzanine fund to go buy other companies. They bought one small company for like $1 million. They didn't buy any others. I don't think they made a single payment. And so 3 years after they borrowed the money, they got foreclosed on by the mezz. So by that time, the company's down to about 3.1 million in revenue, has like a $6 million negative net worth, is losing over $1 million a year.
Wow. I've got so many questions about that. So before I get into some of the technical questions around that, I'd just be curious to know how you felt as Fred, I'm assuming, is keeping you in the loop as people are leaving, their 18 months are coming up and they're like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
You're seeing what's happening through the grapevine. I'm assuming Fred is kind of keeping you somewhat in the loop as to what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, he was.
What was that like to see your baby struggle to breathe?
Well, it's never good. I mean, you've got your as anybody who builds a company like this has a certain amount of identification is tied up in the success of the business, and it's still got my name on it. So, you don't feel good about it. On the other hand, it was sad to see. On the other hand, I was able to move on quickly, which I was lucky. It's part of the reason why we took the deal that we did, and it wasn't richer than it was. I was lucky to get out of there and doing my own thing. I started another business pretty quickly after that and relocated and became a college professor. And, so I was living a pretty good life, honestly. But yeah, it was sad to see the company declining, and I'd get calls from clients and emails from people complaining and telling me about stupid stuff they were doing.
So as you look at the autopsy now, it sounds like you draw a significant line to the culture that you created that was destroyed. And the culture, if I'm understanding correctly, was very collaborative. You had an open book team. You shared you shared information, financial information. You shared profits. You let people buy in, so there was shared equity. This was a Jack Stack open book management sort of case study.
Yes.
And they flipped it and made it. It sounds like more of a spreadsheet, Wall Street kind of company where it's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Why would we give all these sort of shared bonuses? Like we've got to, meritocracy. We've got to have individual bonuses based on individual contributions. And,
yes.
And they went from your culture to a very different culture. Is that the reason it failed?
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, they also did other things, like just went crazy on overhead, and the headquarters was in the IBM building on Wacker Drive in Chicago. And, you had to go up to like the 60th floor or whatever, and then walk across a lobby and then go up again. It's just too much of that stuff. The guy they put in as CEO, eventually he was having some kind of an affair with a marketing person, and he and the CFO embezzled from the company. They never got charged with any crime. They were confronted, and they wired some of the money back. And then there was a claim filed on the D&O insurance that paid another, I think it was about $400,000 that they got back that way through the D&O insurance. But yeah, they weren't.
It sounds like a soap opera.
Yeah, they weren't running it like we did. Okay, I'll just say that. It just was a totally different game. And the last thing that happened before they got taken back by their lender, I had the guy who was the chairman and the head of the private equity firm come visit me here in Fayetteville and said, when you own this company, your intercompany travel charges were never more than $20,000 in a year, and now it's $400,000. How do you explain that? And I said to the guy, you're a CPA. How do you explain it? Okay. I have no idea how you did that. Well, it turned out that was part of their scheme is they each had credit cards, the CEO and CFO, and they would just buy whatever they wanted. And then the company paid it and they charged it off to intercompany travel. And this company had, outside accountants that evidently didn't catch this stuff, which is mind-boggling to me. As I said, we had a history of audited financials because we knew we wanted to build this to sell it. And it always makes a buyer more comfortable when they know you've got good financials out there, not compilations, not reviews. We paid for an audit, And anyway, so yeah.
But it's like the vultures, picking up the carcass. It's unbelievable. I just want to be clear on something. So the private equity group pays, they say 10 million, 80% in cash. You roll a bit of equity. Right. Thank goodness you made that a relatively small portion of the deal. They take on this mezzanine debt, and you said earlier that mezzanine debt, mezz financers will give financing to established companies that are growing with no strings attached. But there was a string attached, if I'm understanding this correctly, that in the event the company defaulted, wasn't able to pay back the loan, they had the rights to take over the business, which they did.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. So the collateral is the business itself. Yeah.
Got it. That's helpful. Okay. Got it.
Yep.
Okay. So no personal guarantee, et cetera, but if all hell goes, everything goes wrong, then they can take the business back, which they did. They brought in the crooked guy who was a disaster. And so where does it go from there?
Excuse me. Well, after a year of this guy, they then called me up and said, hey, would you be willing to come back? And the first thing I said was, no, I'm a teacher here, 3/4 time professor. And I've got this other business that's rocking along and it's doing $5 or $10 million a year in revenue by that time. And the last thing I want is another job. Well, they kept leaning on me. Then, I talked to my best friend who was my basically the manager of my other business. And she's like, oh, maybe you should do it. I said, okay, I'll work 25% time. And they said they'd pay me at the time, I think it was $166,000 for 25%. And they gave me, I hate to misspeak on this stuff. Sometimes I forget exactly what the numbers were, but I think it was around like 12% of the company. Maybe it was more than that. They just gave it to me. Okay. So, but my first task was to find a CEO who could run it. I said, and I also said, the only way I'm going to do this is if I can open up an office in Fayetteville and hire some of my friends. All right. And I said, the woman who worked for my other business, actually, she didn't work for my other business at that time, but she was my friend and I respected her. So she goes, you should do it. So I did. So she's the first person I hired. And she and I are married today, but that's another story. But so she was the first person I hired. I set up an office here and we started to bring some of the functions here. And of course, then we encountered all the problems of discovering how this guy was sucking all the money out of the company. So on top of the fact that we had almost no staff, I think we were down to 18 people, 19 people. Reputations shattered, product quality is horrible, tons of complaints, accounts payable out the yin yang. We owed everybody hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to hotels, 400,000 to this hotel, 200,000 to that one. They skipped out an office in the middle of the night. We had a judgment against us. It just was
soap opera.
It was just unbelievable. So, a lot of this. So my business manager and myself, we just had to slog through it. We just turned this thing around. I mean, and Sonia negotiated with every single person we owed money to, got on payment plans. Even the judgment for 366, she got down. What if I pay you $150,000 over the next 24 months, and if I'm late by 1 hour, you get the whole. You can go back after me for all of it. And they went for deals like that. Okay. I mean, we did. You could say, well, that's terrible. That you're beating these people down. But I mean, we didn't create the problem. All right. And the choice was they get nothing. I mean, we had a serious negative net worth. So we did. And some of the people we did pay off in full, but we got out of everything one way or another. And then the next thing was, how are we going to grow this thing? Well, of course, direct mail had sort of died down over that time. And now we're into the e-marketing world. And so, my first thought was, we need to be emailing like crazy. I want to send out 3 emails a day to everybody on our list. And, the turnaround guy's like, oh, you'll kill the list. The lender's like, that's terrible. You'll kill the list. I'm like, I'm out of business like next week, if we don't sell stuff. So we just inundated the market with emails. And John, we increased our revenue by 60% over the next 2 years, which was a huge
What happened to your
thing.
subscribe rate? Did you lose a lot of subscribers?
We lost some, but the way I look at it, it's like, if for everybody who complains, if 50 people buy something, I'm like, I don't listen to the complainer. I've heard this so many times. I've been in so many arguments with people. I work with a company today that we went from a weekly email to sell our products and accessories to a daily email. And you know what happened? We started selling a lot more stuff. Okay. They believe it now. All right. But anyway, so, we did that. We made a lot of key hires. I hired back some people who used to work there, and then in 2012, I mean, by then we kind of got the ship straightened out, and we had to, the mezzanine fund that owned us was trying to close out. We knew we were up against a hard stop. So we needed to buy the company back from them in its entirety. Now, I put another $250,000 into it along the way, by the way, which gave me 42.5%, I think, of the ownership. Okay. So then I sent one email out to the CEO of a large software company that serves our industry. I had met the guy once briefly, and I said, look, I'm Mark Zweig. Maybe you remember me. I've got this company that does all these things, and we serve the same industry you do. And I need some money to buy it back from the lender. I explained the story is much more succinctly than I did today. But I need roughly $2 million to buy it back. I figure $1.5 million, we can buy the company, and then with another $500,000 for working capital. So I get this back from the guy. He says, yes, Mr. Zweig, I remember you. I have very high regard for you and your company, because I will come down there and see you with my CFO and general counsel. So he flies down here on their private plane, negotiates with the lender, gives us the $2 million, 20% interest. They didn't want any ownership of the company. Okay. He goes, look, I just want my 20%. If you give me the 20%, we'll be happy. That's all I need. So we did this. They were also advertisers, and they spent $300,000 or $400,000 a year in our magazine. And we thought, this is going to be great. We'll be getting more advertising out of them. It'll pay for this 20% interest, and make that a manageable thing. And this is a great deal. All right. And he really was hands off, really a great, he did stick me with one guy that they were trying to move out of senior management, and sort of saddled us with him. I think it was the way to keep his conscience clear of letting somebody go. We ended up with that guy. And I wasn't too high on him from the get-go, I'll be honest with you. But I said, okay. So then the next thing is we paid that interest for 30 months. That was $1 million, 20%, 400,000 a year. And we paid 100,000 of the principal back. So now we were down to 1.9. At the time I did that transaction with them, we also brought in somebody who was going to be the future CEO, because I was already trying to figure out how I was going to get out of this thing again. Because by now it's taken all my time, and it's, you can imagine what it's like. So
where are you at this point, revenue wise?
Well, we started out at like 3 million, and we got up to probably 5 by the time we bought it back. Right around would have been 2.5 years later, I guess, something like that. Okay, so we're doing about 5, and we're making money again. We're back to making our $500,000 a year or whatever. It's everything's calmed down, and still getting paid salaries. So don't get confused about EBIT, listeners. I had a pretty decent salary, had my company car again, all that stuff. So then the next thing we did, so I brought this other guy in, and I'm trying to train him, moving him through all areas of the business. And we hired some other really good people. And then the next thing we did is we refinanced that debt to him with a $2.5 million SBA 7A loan. And paid off the 1.9, and then had another 600,000 in working capital.
And okay. What was the interest rate on the 2.5 with the SBA?
It was like 6 or 6.5, something like that. I mean, it was tied to prime, so it was about a third.
So now we're back into like normal land, not this 20% stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like a 20-year amortization or something. I mean, it just dramatically, with principal, payments went down to like 27, 28,000 a month. From 40,000 being interest only, or 400,000, 33,000 interest only. So that was good. All right, that helped things. So then, everything chugged along pretty well, kept growing. And in 2018, again, I'd gone through another divorce. This time in 2016. And I was ready to do something else again, go back and focus on other business opportunities. And so I proposed to at that time, there were 3 other partners. One of them was my oldest daughter, who I didn't even hire initially. She was hired by somebody else that worked there. And she'd grown along and got her MBA, and she's good. And then these 2 other people, the future CEO and this and another woman who's very strong attorney and MBA, and so all 3 of them had their MBAs. In fact, one the CEO engineer, and so I had sort of made the baton pass to him the year before, and so I just figured out, here's this deal that we could do, that you guys could afford to do. It was a 15-year deal. Okay. Where basically I'll sell all my ownership back to the company on a 15-year agreement, interest-bearing note, and a consulting agreement. And so here it is. We're 5.5 years later, and the payments have been made, and the company's still in business, and it's profitable, and I think so far everybody's been pretty happy. I'm glad to be gone. And
how did you value it for that deal? Were you back to the multiple of revenue model, or how did you think about it?
I thought, how I thought about it was, this is what it's going to take for me to give up what I've got and the opportunity that this business represents. And this is something you guys can afford to do. I hate to say, I can't get into the specific numbers, but it was affordable for them based on their their cash flow and profitability and gave them 100% control of the company. And it was manageable, and I was happy with it. Same thing, the company.
What's your recourse if they don't pay? What happens?
The only thing is the company is the collateral again. And if you got it back, it'd probably be in bad shape. Okay.
You're going to get it back a third time.
No, I'm not.
You got 10 more years to find out.
I'm not. I don't think that's going to happen. Thankfully, they're doing a fine job, and everybody's getting paid, and they're in good shape financially. So I'm really not worried about that. They're already out of the SBA loan. You know, it's.
Mark, I've never asked this question. I've done 450 or so interviews on Built Car Radio. I've never asked this question, but I think you are the perfect guy to ask it to, because I've always wondered, and I'm not being facetious in asking this question or in any way trying to be cheeky, but I'm trying to understand why divorce is such a trigger, it seems, or in many cases surrounds the sale of a company. You've gone through it twice, and I don't mean to shine a spotlight on that, but I do want to know, like, what is it about divorce? Like, which is the chicken that comes first? You get divorced and then you sell, then you get divorced. Like, what is it about selling a business? Why these two things are so oftentimes tied together?
Well, being on wife number 3, who I always tell third time's the charm, and she reminds me I'm only number 2 for her. And I tell her, you can do anything you want after I'm gone. I don't care at all. Don't feel bad. It's like you live a different life, John. It's like you know, it sounds crazy, but it's so different that, you know, you're starting a new life in essence, and you sit back and you go, okay, this is all the stuff that happened. Is this the way I want to live? Do I want to do something different?
Are you up for a quick lightning round of questions?
Sure, absolutely.
Related to the sale of Zweig?
The internal or external sale?
Well, it's interesting. I think the most applicable for our audience would be the external sale to the private equity group.
Okay.
And so let's start there. And if you have a different, you know, response, and we can change it later. But sure. What was the most questionable or slimiest trick a prospective acquirer or investor tried to play on you in the process of selling your company?
Warrants and reps with an unlimited amount of money for an unlimited amount of time. That's always the biggie right there. So basically, you're guaranteeing that everybody who works there is going to work there forever, and you'll never lose a client. Okay. So that's the thing that they try to slide in on you. You know, we had a very good attorney who was extremely helpful and very knowledgeable. Guy who was my only outside director and somebody that I had worked with extensively and trusted. And of course, he got that beaten down to 1.5 million over 18 months. And there were no clawbacks at all on us from that deal. It's part of the reason why we had the 18-month golden handcuff.
Biggest mistake you made personally in selling the first time around to the private equity group?
I don't think I was involved enough in it. If I was to say what I think was a mistake, I was so mentally shifted out of the business and dealing with my personal issues that I basically let my partners handle all of it. And I'm not trying to be critical of them. They did a good job with their knowledge and the situation and the time that we were in. It was a different climate, you know, but I would have been more involved in. If I was doing it today, I would be leading the effort. I would be more involved with it. I think I could probably strike a better deal for sure. That's probably, you know, the most important thing.
You know, many of the people we talk to characterize selling a company as emotional roller coaster. What was your high and what was your low?
Well, my high was getting a big check, and trying to figure out like if it was safe to deposit that in the bank because they've only got like 100,000. I mean, really, it was like a problem I'd never encountered at that time, Um, so that was sort of the high, going back, 3 or 4 months later, and they had a nice little party for me. It was great. It was fun. It was going out on a high note. We weren't in financial trouble, nothing like that. So that was the high point. And of course, the low point is just seeing what's happening afterward and hearing the stories from people and feeling like they're completely screwing things up because they want to put their stamp on it. I think a lot of people are like that. If they take over a business, they feel like it's important that they put their stamp on it to claim the glory or whatever, ego gratification. I don't know. But they got to be, I think a lot of times you got to be super careful about that. It takes a lot of knowledge of a business.
In a way, though, it validated you and your model, the fact that they screwed it up so badly. Was there part of you in buying it back from the mezz debt company, was part of your motivation to prove them wrong?
Absolutely. I mean, always is, it's you want to restore your image. You want to show that you can do it. All that is very much part of it. But at the same time, I'd like to think I'm not such an egocentric owner or somebody who creates a business that only works if I'm there, because that's not good. Then you're going to be trapped. You're not going to get the full value for it. A lot of problems with that. You'll never get away from it anyway. They'll want you to be working there forever. Sure. So, I mean, I think the second time around was a lot better from that standpoint. But yeah.
Did you buy yourself a trophy?
No, I didn't buy myself. I always had lots of toys and stuff. So it was not like I needed more of them. I've had too many, I'm on the reduction mode, the reduction of everything. I mean, at one point, if you go back like 5 years ago, I had, all these businesses going at the same time. I had a warehouse over here with an office in it for my other business with, 10 or 15 antique cars and 10 or 15 motorcycles and a bar in it. And, just all this real estate. We had 67 houses, condos, apartments, 44,000 square feet of commercial real estate.
Oh my God.
It was just like crush. And then the 2 ex-wives you're still supporting and 5 daughters in our combined family. It's like, wow, man, I got to simplify. I don't need any trophies anymore. Honestly, I don't need anything. I'm totally happy. No more. I've had Rolls Royces and 911s and all that. I just don't need it. And I aspire to less. It's basically what I want to be less.
I wish you well in your life as a monk. And where can people reach out to you? You've written an amazing book. People should pick up Confessions of an Entrepreneur. They can also learn about you through LinkedIn. What's the best way for people to reach out and say hi on social?
I think LinkedIn is the place that I go these days.
And we will put your email address, your LinkedIn profile, links to Confessions of an Entrepreneur, the book, in the show notes that'll be available at builttosell.com. Mark, thanks for doing this.
Hey, thank you, John. I'm honored to be here with you. And 450 plus of these you've done. That's unbelievable. You must have.
Well, with guests like you and stories like yours, it makes it easy, my friend.
Thank you very much.